Our first presenter this evening is Russel Roybal, Deputy Executive Director at the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. And it is Russell's great job this evening to present the findings of that report to us.
Well, good evening, everyone. I want to thank Lisa and the Center on Halsted for hosting us here this evening to present the findings from our National Transgender Discrimination Survey. We began the survey in September of 2008. We had about 6,500 respondents. It's the largest sampling and gathering of data on the transgender community ever. A lot of this data is really depressing, right? Really depressing. The devastating effects that discrimination has on the transgender community. So there is a lot of stuff that we need to do as a community and as a movement to make sure that we're using the data from this particular survey to make sure that we are changing policy that is real inclusion of the transgender and gender nonconforming community. We found that most respondents, nearly, well over 90% had at some point experienced discrimination in their educational process. 78% have been harassed, 35% physically assaulted, 12% sexually assaulted, 6% expelled. And a third of the sample experienced a lot of these issues from instructors. 90% in terms of their work history were harassed, mistreated, discriminated against, or hid who they were to avoid being the targets of discrimination. 44% were not hired as a result of their transgender identification or being gender nonconforming. Our respondents were half as likely to own a home versus the national average. 19% have been refused a home or an apartment because they're transgender or gender nonconforming. 11% have been evicted because of their gender identity or expression. Right? So there are no laws in place in some parts of the country that prevent discrimination based upon identifying as transgender. 19% of the survey or the respondents have been homeless at some point in their lives. At some point in their lives, which is double the current homelessness rate. Shelters. Now, I know that in many communities, this is a huge issue. Certainly it is for us in Washington, D.C. and other parts of the country, but 29% were denied access altogether to a shelter. Only 59% were able to update their driver's license in our samples. 50% could update their social security card. 26% were able to update their passport, and 24% were able to update their birth certificate. A lot of folks who present as the gender that is marked on their ID documents don't experience a lot of harassment. But transgender and gender nonconforming people, when they go to the DMV or when they need to use their driver's license or passport to gain entry to something, to go through the airport, that it becomes a battle and an obstacle for the way that folks have to live their lives because in many cases their gender presentation does not match what is on their ID document. 22% reported harassment by police. 6% reported physical assault by peace officers. 2% reported sexual assault, and 46% were uncomfortable being able to call the police, even if their lives were in danger, because they were afraid of being harassed or assaulted by the criminal justice system. Of course, when you add the lens of race on top of that, the incidents of discrimination multiply. 7% of the sample were arrested or held due to police bias. So they were targeted because they were transgender or gender nonconforming. 16% were incarcerated for any reason, right? So it didn't matter that they were incarcerated for any reason because they were transgender. Of those who were incarcerated, 16% were physically assaulted, 15% were sexually assaulted. Often put into populations that did not match their gender identity or expression. Were outright refused medical care by medical professionals. And 28%, right, almost a third of the sample, postponed medical care when they were sick or injured because they did not want to go through this harassment and discrimination with their doctor. The survey respondents were 4 times as likely to have HIV, 2.64% versus the general population of 0.6%. The rates were much higher for transgender women, 4.28%. And with those who are unemployed or who have done sex work, right? As you can see, folks who turn to the underground economy strictly for survival in many cases, right, have significantly high rates of HIV. Experienced some significant family rejection, right? They were not accepted. Now, on the flip side of this is that 43% of the respondents, actually their families did accept them. So those who were more accepted by their families had less incidences of discrimination, or the effect of discrimination had less negative impact on those folks. Of those who actually transitioned felt more comfortable at work. They felt more comfortable in their daily lives. That many folks in the survey, although they had experienced discrimination in school, are returning to school. And the folks who had a really high rate of homelessness are back in housing in some way, shape, or form.
All right, our panel this evening is made up of some local community activists. I think it's important to have both the national information and then exceptionally important to highlight what's going on in our local area and people that are providing some leadership and energy around the very issues we're talking about on the national report today. Kate Sosin is co-founder of Gender Queer Chicago and the creator of the Trans Friendly Bathroom Initiative in Chicago. Kate frequently covers transgender-related news for Windy City Times. Anthony Martinez is executive director of the Civil Rights Agenda, which continues the fight for individual rights through coalition building and leadership, supporting communities with the necessary tools that will equip them with the resources and confidence to establish equality for all persons, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. Owen Daniel McCarter is project attorney and collective member at Transformative Justice Law Project of Illinois. The Transformative Justice Law Project of Illinois, affectionately known as TJLP, is a collective of radical lawyers, social workers, activists, and community organizers who are deeply committed to prison abolition, transformative justice, and gender self-determination.
One of the stories that a lot of trans people share is anxiety over bathrooms. There's a website that, if you're familiar with trans stuff, you may know. It's called safe2p.org. And Chicago has this website, and basically it lists places where trans people can use the bathroom. We thought, well, this is online, it's not really accessible or visible to people, and very few businesses or organizations were listed. And while we tend not to work with businesses for a lot of reasons, we thought maybe if we created some kind of visual symbol for folks that were walking around that needed just a place to stop, and also created some kind of reward system, then we could start to change the way that people talk about gender generally, but also provide these like safety points in our communities. We got these little decals printed, they're really pretty. In the process, we asked the Human Rights Commission to look over the wording, and so it relies on the Illinois Human Rights Act, which says that you can't discriminate against people in public accommodations based on gender expression or identity. We created a wiki page, and any group that wants to get involved, that wants to update the page, that wants to distribute these, or any individual can get them and do it and be like, this is my neighborhood and I want them.
Once the organization was founded, the very first project that we started was the Workplace Project. And this project specifically addresses workplace discrimination, and more specifically for the LGBT community. And what we try to do with the Workplace Project is allow anyone who comes to us talking about workplace discrimination. There's an intake process that we go through to address the situation and assess their situation. And if we can, we try to take that on, whether it be going to the company and asking them to adopt a policy, and if need be, then going through the legal recourse of making sure that that happens, or whether we need to work on behalf of the plaintiff, the person who's bringing the claim of discrimination, and we'll provide pro bono legal services. And then lastly, another component of this is policy advocacy. So we have a very robust legislative team that is down in Springfield weekly and specifically works on policies around the LGBT community and more recently around transgender policies.
What we do is we provide free criminal legal services to transgender and gender nonconforming people who are targeted by the criminal legal system. We think about the way that when you have a criminal conviction, it can increase the chances of likelihood or certainty of discrimination. We also do education, so we'll do trainings for other providers, so whether it's case managers, social workers, therapists, folks who are working in homeless shelters, in the kinds of places that are supposed to be social safety nets for people to stay out of the criminal legal system, but wind up being really transphobic places because they are sex segregated, and for a number of other reasons. We try to do trainings there.
And just thank you again, clearly, to Russell for presenting the executive summary of the report. And obviously to our panelists, Jay, Anthony, Kate, and Owen. Thank you very much.